Flipping properties sounds simple, right? Buy a place cheap, fix it up, sell it for a profit. It can be a brilliant way to build your pot fairly quickly. But if you get one key thing wrong, like the numbers, the timing, or even just missing a detail, your profit can disappear overnight. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how flipping works here in the UK, step by step, and one major oversight that I nearly made that could have wiped out my margin before I even got started. Flipping, in its simplest form, is buying a property, adding value, and selling it for more than you paid. You're not holding it long term or renting it out. You're in and out in a few months, and it can absolutely work and be used to build capital for bigger deals down the line. But it's not automatic. There is no safety net. With a buy-to-let, you've got rental income to cover mistakes or delays, but with a flip, if you overspend or mistime the market, then there's no buffer. Now, I'm going to say something possibly controversial. I don't think flips are the best place for budding property investors to start, mostly because you've got margins that are tighter and you've got to be more precise with your numbers. In my opinion, flips tend to work better once you've done a refurb or two and you've got a feel for what things cost and the timelines behind them. And then ideally you've got a bit of cash to work with as well. But even if I'm intending to flip a property, I still always run the numbers like I might hold it as a buy-to-let, because if the market turns or the sale falls through, I want to be in a position where I can refinance and rent it out instead. There are 6 main stages that I go through every time I'm looking to flip a deal. So step 1 is to get really clear on what your actual plan is. This sounds really obvious, but loads of people just go, oh yeah, I'll flip a house I've seen on Rightmove, without actually thinking it through. So you've got to ask yourself, are you flipping it just to make some quick cash, or are you open to keeping the property and renting it out if the sale doesn't go to plan? Because your strategy affects everything. The kind of area that you look in, the type of property you're looking to buy, even how much to budget for the refurb. So I always try to be clear on my plan A, which in this example is to flip a property, and have a decent plan B in the background, which may be to rent the property out. Next up, and this is a really big one, is step 2, which is finding the right deal. You have to buy a property below market value. If you overpay, then the whole flip falls apart before you've even started. And you've got to know what a good deal looks like. You've got to understand the area. What are similar houses nearby actually selling for? Not what they're listed at, what are they completing at? Personally, I like looking for those cookie cutter houses, those like 80s, 90s standard terraces or semis, because they're way easier to compare them between each other. Quirky one-off houses can be cool, but they're a nightmare to price accurately. I've actually done a full video on how I find properties to invest in, what tools I use and how I narrow it down. And I'll put a link up here to that if you want to check it out. So you've got a potential deal, now it's time to do the numbers. This is step 3, and it's where a lot of people get caught out. So let's say you're buying a property for £120,000. You're spending 20k on the refurb and then hoping to sell it for 165k. So on paper that looks like 25k profit, right? But then you've got stamp duty, which would be about 6k for a 120k property right now, if you're buying it as an additional property or through a company. And then you've got solicitor fees, estate agent fees, finance costs, insurance, and then maybe additional bridging fees depending on how you're funding it. And if you're doing it in your own name, personally, rather than through a company, then you'll probably be paying capital gains tax too. So that £25,000 can quickly shrink to about £10,000 to £12,000. And that's if everything goes smoothly. And that's an expensive use of your time. So to help combat this, I run all of my deals through my property investment spreadsheet before I even make an offer. That way I know exactly what I can afford to pay for that property. If you want to use it too, then I'll put a link to my website where you can find it. It's completely free and you'll find that in the description. Now step 4 is buying the property and funding it. Most flips aren't done with cash. You're usually using bridging loans, investor finance, joint ventures, something that lets you move quickly. And that's all fine, but it does mean more costs and a bit more pressure. Oh, and one thing to keep in mind, if you want to own the property through a limited company, you need to buy it that way up front. You can't just move it to the limited company later. Well, you can, but usually you'll end up paying stamp duty again because it's classed as a sale, even if it's to yourself. If you're unsure, I've got a separate video on personal versus company ownership. That might be worth checking out, I'll put it up here. Step 5 is the actual refurb, which is where flips either come together or completely fall apart. And it's typically the step that goes wrong the most. You go over budget, you miss something big or fall behind on your schedule, and your profit gets eaten away super fast. I had one deal fairly recently where I was offering on a house with just single glazed windows in, but luckily I caught pretty last minute, more last minute than I like to admit, that the place was in a conservation area, Article 4, which meant I'd need custom made timber sash double glazed windows. and that would require planning permission too. It would have easily added over £10,000 to my estimated refurb cost. So that one little detail would have wiped out the profit. So since then, I always use a proper viewing checklist. I've made mine available for free on my website too. It's a PDF, you can download it. Again, links down below. It's helped me avoid a lot of surprises since. And so step 6, and the final step, is actually selling the property. If all goes to plan, you sell the property, pocket the profit, and move on to the next one. Great. But what if the sale falls through or the market cools off while you're doing the refurb? This is why I actually don't find flipping all that stressful, because I always like to check the numbers ahead of time to see what it's like to hold the property instead. If the resale doesn't work out, I want to know that I can refinance, rent it out, and then ride that wave. Basically hedging against market risk. So back in 2008, prices dropped by nearly 20% for houses in some areas, pretty much overnight. If you're halfway through a flip back then, it could have been a disaster for your profits. But if you'd structured it right and kept it rented for a few years whilst the market was dipping, you could have probably come back out ahead. And that's exactly how the BRRR strategy works. I've done a full video showing how I used it on one of my own properties, and I'll link that one up here. So just before we wrap up, a quick couple of notes that I thought are worth saying. First is tax. If you're flipping in your personal name, then the profit is usually taxed as capital gains. But if you're flipping it through a company, a limited company maybe, you'll be paying corporation tax, which is currently 19 to 25% on a sliding scale, and then possibly dividend tax on top if you're taking the money out. There's no one size fits all here for the tax, and I advise speaking to an accountant or a financial advisor, but it really depends on your own goals. Also, if you're just getting started and don't own a property yet, one thing to consider is a live-in flip. You buy a place, do it up while living in it, and then sell it on once you've added value. Because it's your main residence, you'll usually avoid capital gains tax, and your bills and stamp duty are lower too. And if you're on a good mortgage deal, you might even be able to port it to your next place. It really depends on your lender, but that means you won't have to break your contract halfway through. It's not fast money, you've got to live through a refurb, but it's a smart way to build up equity and experience without jumping into full-time investment straight away. So yes, house flipping can absolutely work, and it can give you great returns fairly quickly. But let me be totally clear on this. It's not passive, it's not forgiving, and the margin for error is very small. You need to go in with a plan, get your numbers right, and have a solid backup. Ideally something that still works as a rental if you need it to. If you want to run your own numbers, then grab the spreadsheet down below, and if you're off to a viewing soon, make sure you download the checklist too. And if you want to see how I actually switched one of my potential flips into a rental and still pulled out most of my money, check out this BRRR video that I'll link over here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.